It's not calling you Josh Frydenberg, it's calling you Dosh Frydenberg.
Under the Coalition, taxes for hard-working Australians will always be lower.
You know, I don't hold a hose, mate, and I don't sit in control room.
They're answers that only can come from Victoria, I'm afraid, because that's not my job.
But I ain't spending any time, though, because in the meantime, every 3 months, a person was torn to pieces by a crocodile in North Queensland.
Well, g'day, listeners, and welcome once again to the Two Jacks. It's episode 151, recorded on this, I think it's a Maundy Thursday, isn't it, Jack?
I don't know. Holy Thursday,
yeah,
we
I
used
think
to call
so.
it. But
Not a great one for religious days, but I think that's Maundy Thursday, the day before Good Friday, of course, and the Easter break. And we want to wish all our listeners a very happy Easter and hope you have a good time with family, etc. Jack is joining us, of course, Hong Kong Jack, that is. What's going on in Hong Kong over Easter, mate?
well, it's a bit like Melbourne used to be back in the 80s and 90s. It kind of empties out a little bit Easter time.
Yeah, well, living in the Southern Highlands, enormous amount of traffic just today when I've been out and about. A lot of people coming down here for their weekends. In a place where Christianity is, well, decidedly in the minority, Jack. How is Easter celebrated?
Oh, yeah, just the usual. I mean, people, there are plenty of religious types here of all different kinds. But they are a minority. I can remember one of my first paid, apart from doing my paper round, one of the first paid days' work I did was a Good Friday in Echuca many years ago. Spent the whole day pumping petrol into people's tanks. It was so busy up there, a bit like the Southern Highlands, I should think, of people turning up for the weekend. You know, there was a tennis tournament on and a golf tournament on, and
it's a great time to get away. Although people might be refraining somewhat with the cost of petrol at this stage, diesel in particular. I see that the Albanese government has moved to, and this has just been announced today, that there'll be a further cut to the petrol excise. I put some petrol in the car today and noticed that it had dropped by about 26 cents. That's just unleaded petrol. And there'll be a further cut. Now, Anthony Albanese spoke to the nation. His first address to the nation, televised address to the nation, Jack, ran on all the television networks. Did you see it?
I did see it.
Yes, I think the joke was it could have been done in a tweet. And I think that's probably about right. But Mark Di Stefano from the Fin Review said, people on here hate it, as do I, but maybe Albo's one true talent is understanding normie Australia. Can't wait to hear how my mum is doing my bit at Good Friday lunch. So it was really a speech without a lot of detail and just a comment that the government would do everything that it could, but a suggestion that the next couple of months are going to be quite difficult for people. No talk of petrol rationing yet. And looking at the industry minister on 7:30 last night, Jack, he was saying that rationing is probably the last thing they want to do. I mean, I'm reading between the lines here because I think the Labor government is very conscious of government overreach around rationing and all the difficulties that arise there. So I think it's a last gasp sort of thing to be done. But at this stage, according to the PM, we're getting as much oil or petrol, diesel into the country as we can. Our partners in Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand are setting aside tankers for us to be supplied with. It seems to be okay, Jack, but we also had another speech from Donald Trump today. Did you watch much of that?
I saw a little bit. On Albo's speech, if you were looking for politics, perhaps that's what Mark Di Stefano is referring to, there was none there, really. It was pretty empty. But if it was an attempt to provide some reassurance, perhaps it did work. You know, I mean, I suspected he was doing it because they'd focus group this and found it was a good idea. But
I believe one of his political mentors suggested it might be a good idea to speak to the nation at this difficult time. So I think that's where it came from. But then there wasn't a lot of detail, and maybe people did sort of look at it and go, "Oh, okay," and feel somewhat reassured about it all. Yes, as I said, the rough interpretation of it was that it could have been done in a tweet. But there was, of course, the other speech from Donald Trump today, Jack. Let me just pull this up. Let's see now. I'm just looking at market response to his speech, and the S&P 500 has dropped about 550 billion since his speech began, Jack. So not good signs from the market, or is it just another case of market manipulation by the Trump administration?
Don't know. I didn't see anything. I haven't seen the whole speech, but I haven't seen anything so far that was surprising, really.
Well, obviously the market has not been reassured, Jack. One other thing, probably the major news story earlier in the week was Desi Freeman, been on the run since August 26. In Porapunka, he shot two police officers.
August 25, actually. August 25.
25. Thank you. And wounded another. Shot two police officers dead. He was found in a property in just outside Walwa on the Murray River. Special Operations Group, Victoria's elite tactical response group, took him out. The word is, Jack, at least 5 members of the SOGs ripped rounds into him. He came forth he was forced out of a shipping container. They pump it with gas, and so he stumbled out with a doona wrapped around him, or a blanket wrapped around him, and was holding a service revolver. It was blown some distance away from him. 5 soldiers using automatic weapons, even a 1 second pull on the trigger is going to put about 50 rounds into Desi Freeman, and I'm told that they had to DNA test him to determine it was him. One thing that really shocked me, Jack, was just the level of appeal that this fellow has. You know, he was being lauded as a hero. He was being, we were being told that the Special Operations Group had conducted a state-sanctioned murder. This came from, the usual sort of fringe dwellers on social media. But having a look through some of the comments, some of the more awful comments, a lot of them were coming from One Nation people who have put the One Nation flag on their Twitter accounts. And of course, we haven't heard a peep out of Pauline Hanson in regard to Desi Freeman. We haven't heard a peep out of Barnaby Joyce. We haven't heard a peep out of Craig Kelly, not that he's with One Nation anymore. They all had plenty to say on social media, but nothing in regard to Desi Freeman. Are they a little concerned perhaps that they don't want to upset their constituents, or some of them at least, Jack?
Could be. There is, of course, a long history.
Most definitely is. But go on.
Yeah, there's a long history of this sort of lauding of people who they see as rebels. I mean, it goes right back to in the northeast of Victoria. It goes right back to the Kelly days.
It does, and there are a number of similarities there. But I think often forgotten in this is that when police, I think 10 police officers, moved to Porapunka to serve him with essentially a criminal complaint, it's for child child sex abuse, Jack.
Hmm.
So there's this really sort of blinkered view of this guy that he was set up and all this sort of stuff. But, one thing that we notice from sort of fringe politics and some of those jumping in the One Nation bandwagon now is they despise pedophiles, and they often talk conspiratorially about pedophiles in prominent places. But when it comes to one of their own, just ignore it.
Hmm.
All right. Well, we did have a bit of a chat over the last couple of episodes about political affiliations and media consumption, those sorts of things, and we did hear from one of our listeners about this, and I wanted to read this. It's a rather lovely letter. He said, and this is from our listener Lawrence. He said, "I feel my perspective may have gone against the general trend. Brought up in a country party household in the time of Doug Anthony, there was a level of indoctrination. Coalition good, Labor bad. An idea reinforced by the sacking of the Whitlam government. It pretty much continued on trend into the 2000s, when I regret to admit some sympathy for Pauline Hanson's rhetoric around Asian immigration. As I have mentioned before, I had a fairly serious farm accident. I'll just abbreviate a little bit, but he spent a long time. He suffered a very severe burns and spent a long time in hospital. Such intense contact, he writes, with our medical system changed my historical views about the Whitlam government. A medical system isn't perfect, but it's pretty bloody good. They had the foresight to put it in place, something I don't think either Malcolm Fraser or John Howard would have done. It also meant I interacted with people from so many different countries and cultures. Invariably, they all had the same goals: to make a better life for their families. Whether it was the Malaysian cleaner who also drove an Uber and showed me a picture of his son that went to a selective school, or the Muslim nurse whose two daughters were at university, or the Polynesian orderly who had to lift me on and off the bedpan in the burns ward. Hard-working, decent people doing unglamorous jobs without whom the country wouldn't run. It makes my blood boil when I hear politicians sprout hate towards them. The biggest eye-opener for me was the 18 months after I left hospital. I had burns to 75% of my body, so I was wearing a full-body pressure suit with a hood and gloves. For someone who was always blended into Australian society as a straight white guy, the change in approach and attitude of people around me was quite confronting. Even when I was at home in my local environment, there were some uncomfortable interactions. I was never abused or assaulted. It was subtle: the double takes, the pointing, the laughing. It's not that I blame people. I looked really weird. When I didn't have to wear it anymore, the burn suit, it caused me to ponder about other people who are different, whether it's the colour of their skin, their sexual orientation, or the religious garb they wear. I had the luxury of going back to being anonymous. They live it every day. So some insights there from Lawrence through his own personal experience, and I guess he would be not a rarity, but someone who's moved from the country party to the Labor Party, Jack.
There's quite a few of those.
Yeah, there'd be quite a few, I think, perhaps even more now than there were perhaps 10 years ago. So
They were not called the agrarian socialists for nothing.
Yeah, well, in my own experience of the National Party in this area is not a pleasant one. Unless you know someone who knows someone who's a National Party figure, you're pretty much buggered when it comes to a lot of things, particularly around property development. And we've got a particular problem up here at the moment with certainly allegations of corruption around residential property development here.
Well, I grew up in rural Victoria, and the local country party people were kind of fine, really. You know? I mean, I'm different politics, but they were fine people to deal with.
Yeah, well, I had an excursion to Brisbane where I addressed, I think it's the parliamentary group, essentially speakers and administrators in Parliament all get together. And there were a lot of National Party people from Queensland, and they're all rather lovely too. But there is a sort of clannishness to it, and I'm being very kind here around access to, just the proper administration of things like development applications and what have you.
Mm. Well, I certainly think that the National Party as it now is varies from region to region.
I think that's probably right too, and I think there's a lot of difference between what Queensland Nats think or how they think, and perhaps as someone like Darren Chester down in Gippsland thinks. I mean, you're going to be affected to a large degree around your political environment and your community. All right. Moira Deeming has been taken off the ticket, Jack. The rather controversial Liberal member has essentially been disendorsed from her upper house seat in replacement of Dinesh Gurisetti, who I don't know, but I've seen photos of. And this has caused all sorts of ructions in the right wing of the party with people I saw on Twitter today saying, I want the Labor Party to go, but they're going to lose this and all that sort of stuff. Tell me, is Moira Deeming that important to them?
I don't know how important she is really within the Liberal Party, but I saw a comment the other day which captured it for me. No one has ever written a book about how the Liberal Party of Victoria went from being the party, the branch of the party who ran Australia, and they basically were, right, from the 70s, 80s, right, to a bunch of incompetent weirdos. It's a fascinating story. I think that's
it is
true.
a fascinating story, Jack. And let me tell you how it fell apart for them. I mean, there are still people like Bev MacArthur in the upper house there for the Libs. They courted the what we might call the fringe right. They sought to bring these people in. You know, both parties, Labor and Liberal, have had rather stunning scandals around branch stacking. The Libs have really never addressed theirs. Labor, of course, was sort of forced to, but the Libs really haven't, and that meant you've got a lot of people around there who are getting people into the Liberal Party that have, for want of a better term, more extreme views than the Liberal Party really should be maintaining.
As the numbers of members of political party has dropped off, and it's dropped off markedly since the 1980s, the opportunities for branch stacking have increased. You don't really need that many people to
the Liberals'
to
membership
get control
figures. What do they look? I mean, they're certainly behind One Nation now in terms of membership, and One Nation's membership is it's somewhat different. It costs you $100 flat to be a One Nation member. The Labor Party membership, I think, is about $500, but there are all sorts of concessions and things like that that can make it less than the $100 that One Nation charges. The Liberal Party, I suspect their numbers are probably closer to 10,000 than 20,000. So, you know, again, this is a phenomenon for both the major parties. But again, the Liberal Party's been very, very slow to adapt. Is this going to matter at all in terms of the election later in the year? I doubt it will. I doubt it will make a bit of difference.
Well, it's a bit hard to see exactly what's going to happen in the state election at the end of
November. Yeah,
November. Because it's a little bit hard to read on a seat by seat basis, just who's going to finish where, who's going to finish in the second spot.
Well, we just don't know how One Nation preferences are going to flow. Is it going to be a complete and utter rejection of Labor, so Labor goes last for most One Nation people? We talked about last week the fact that there'll be a lot of, let's say, working class or traditional Labor seats that will swing hard against them. But these are things that we anticipate. Well, we don't obviously know just yet. I mean, there still is a live possibility that Jacinda Allen's government will be returned.
Yeah, it's a distinct possibility that they could fall back across the line, right? I mean, they're in all sorts of trouble, and you would normally expect that they would be turfed out pretty unceremoniously, but because of the troubles within the Liberal Party, and because of the difficulty in predicting just how One Nation's votes are going to go and where they will direct their preferences, or where those preferences will go. It doesn't matter so much how they direct them, but where they
That's
end
right.
up.
Exactly right. So just appearing. So One Nation will obviously print out of 8 cards, and they will list their preferred preferences, but people don't necessarily follow them. And in fact, the growing evidence is that they're being ignored more than they ever used to be.
Yeah. So that is difficult to be confident. You would think that the Allen government would need to be doing better than it is now to survive, but like I say, there is a possibility that it can fall back over the line.
Yeah, it remains a possibility. I personally doubt it, but for weeks a long time in politics, then 7 months is nearly 8 months is an eternity. So a lot can happen. We did have.
You would think that they would need to be a little bit less accident prone than they have been of late to survive.
Well, we're going to get to one of their problems in a moment. But John Ferguson at the Oz. Ferg wrote that hard heads on either side of the political divide are unsure how the One Nation preferences will play out in Victoria, but for Labor to lose, its vote must continue to crater from its already parlous position in the mid to high 20s. If they are genuinely in trouble, that's where that vote will stay. But obviously Labor is hoping that in a campaign and in the lead up to the campaign, their vote will rise somewhat. We'll see. But our old mate Cos Samaras says proper analysis based on seats overlaid with polling paints how difficult it is for the Victorian Coalition Liberal National Party to win the 16 minimum needed for a majority. He said the Liberals will struggle to hold the former Green seat of Paran and are in a fight in seats like the Inner West Hawthorn. That's where Mr. Pizzato is the sitting member, Jack. So may need 18 extra seats or more in an 88-seat parliament to hold a majority. So that tells you that the mass really is quite difficult for them.
It is, yeah. Well, but more importantly, I think the mass is difficult to predict. With all due respect to Cos, I think.
I don't think he's saying it's predictable because we don't know how those preferences are going to land.
No.
But one thing you talked about, the Allen government being prone to scandal and disaster. Watched a very good piece of Norman Hammond at 7:30 last night. Really good study of a problem. That the Victorian government, now debt burden, can't do very much about. Vic teachers went on strike last week, Jack, and in what was reminiscent of the dying days of the Kerner government, the streets of Spring Street and Burke Street outside the Parliament were lined with very, very angry teachers. And I suggest to you right now that if you can't get the teachers on side, you're going to have a lot of trouble.
That's certainly true in Victoria. The old VSTA, the Victorian State Secondary Teachers Association, was a key part of the Labor Party back through the 70s and 80s. We of course have to confess that we come from a very education-rich family. Lots of teachers and union official teachers. Yeah.
And we also understand too that teaching is not about walking into your first class and leaving at the end of the day after your last. There's a lot of work is involved in if you're going to be a good teacher, in preparation and pastoral work and in overseeing kids as they develop. It's an incredibly difficult job. But Jack, I did not know this, but the Victorian teachers, secondary teachers, are the worst paid in Australia. And why I like this Norman Hamont story is that he went up to the Murray and went through some schools there, Chuka, Cobram, those sorts of places, Victorian border towns on the Murray, and they are finding it incredibly hard to keep teachers. There's a starting graduate pay in Victoria is $79,500. In New South Wales, it's 92.8 thousand, 92,800. So you've got teachers. There was an interview with a teacher who'd made the move, and he said, "Look, I was reluctant to do it, but it's not just the money, but because there's been this drain on teachers in Victoria because of the low salaries relative to the other states and territories. These teachers who remained there, particularly in the border towns, were having to do what they call sort of emergency teaching. Well, they would have to, they'd do their own classes and then have to do other classes that there were no teachers for. And he said it was just, in the end, it was just babysitting. That's all we were doing. So poor educational outcomes are going to come from it. Victoria calls itself.
So Norman Hamont's talking to people who were teaching in, say, Cobram, and decided, well, that the 10-minute drive to Barooga for an extra $10,000 is worth it.
Yeah, well, this particular teacher, he said he accepted it, and he was offered a position from a New South Wales secondary school, and he took it. And why wouldn't you? So it was a really good story, actually. It just highlighted some of the structural problems that the Allen government has. They can't correct this. I mean, you would need to correct this over time, but because they're debt burdened, they don't have the money to be giving what essentially would be a 10 to 12% increase in teacher salaries. So if the teachers are again you, and you're a Labor government, certainly in Victoria, you're going to be in all sorts of strife.
Mightn't be as bad as the trams backed up in Burke Street.
No, it wasn't as bad, but it was reminiscent of it, Jack. They were going all the way down from Spring Street to Lonsdale Street, mate, and they were not happy. And when you look at the analysis that Norman Hamont did very, very well at 7:30 last night on the ABC, you can understand why. And it creates this sort of problem, a particular drain around the border schools. Where teachers just, in utter frustration have to leave. They're overworked, underloved, underpaid, and they'll go to New South Wales where they'll at least pick up $13,000 and there's proper staffing levels in their schools.
It's also just terrible for morale if the teachers in the education system look at what's gone on with the big build, what's going to come out next week with the inquiry into how the firefighters did their pay deal, and they look at all this and think, do you know, we're not being looked after. You get a great deal of resentment, and that means it's going to be hard to get them to vote for your government.
Absolutely right. If you can't look after what is essentially your own, I hope you got to look after others.
They are your own in Victoria. You know, they have been for 40 years, 50 years.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd say possibly longer. All right, a federal poll in the United States, in Australia, we'll look at some polling, but not from the United States. A bit later, we've got some from the UK. But in Australia, Labor's primary vote has plunged to 31%, Jack. We got the thesaurus out there, haven't we, boys? It was 34, so I don't know that we would call that a plunge, but it's down. It's definitely down. And then there's some issues around the Prime Minister's popularity as well.
Yeah, his net approval ratings is not good at the moment.
It's been sort of, he was briefly in the positive for a while, but it only lasted about 3 or 4 months after last year's federal election, and then he was in the negative. But he's gone further that way. He still remains as the preferred Prime Minister for what it's worth over Angus Taylor. But does the coalition, the Liberal and National parties, do they get some sucker from any of this, Jack? The coalition's primary vote has risen to 21%. What would you call that, Jack? Would you call that a tsunami? A tsunami of support. One Nation dropping a point to 26%, the Greens lifting to 12%.
If you're a coalition person, you'd be saying, well, it's better than going backwards.
Yeah, right. It is. It's you're going the right way. There are other elements to this poll, Jack, and the Iranian war is deeply unpopular. It showed that the Iranian war is deeply unpopular with Australians. Yes, I don't know how much does the Albanese government wear on things like petrol restrictions and shortage of this and that. There's going to be some ongoing knocks to inflation, construction. Apparently, you just can't get PVC piping at the moment, Jack, and that's of course a petrochemical, petrochemical construction. And PVC piping is used in all plumbing now. Apparently, that's one of the big problems. So we're going to have some big issues in terms of supply around the economy. Do Australians blame the Labor government, or will Australians look at it and go, well, everyone's been dealt a fairly awful hand from the Trump government?
The last time there was I guess an equivalent oil price shock was the early 1970s, and generally speaking, incumbent governments paid a price for it, whether they were directly involved in it or not. And
I do remember those days. I remember Melbourne streets being absolutely, virtually no cars on the road. This was due to industrial action, by the way. So, and it was an extended strike that went for a long time. But I remember, you'd have your odd number plate, your even number plate, and that's when you could fill up. But then it got, there was a cash limit put on it eventually, and I remember I had to ring my mum, get her to pick me up, and she was deeply unhappy about jumping in the car and wasting petrol and picking me up. And I just she did eventually, but I just remember being out on this road, and there wasn't any point hitchhiking because there were no cars there. So we may well be looking at something of that order. Donald Trump, I didn't see his speech today, but he's addressed to the American people, but he's been saying, like, go and get your own oil and all this sort of stuff. It's all rather odd at the moment, and we're still struggling to understand what their objectives are. But we'll get to that in a little while. All right. In Canada, Jack, the CEO of Air Canada, you ever flown Air Canada, Jack?
No.
Yeah, I flew a little leg of a journey there. I wasn't hugely impressed. Anyway, that's just me. The CEO of Air Canada will retire later this year, actually earlier than planned, after being criticised for failing to speak French in a condolence video following last week's fatal collision at LaGuardia Airport in New York, where two pilots were killed. His name is Michael Rousseau, Jack. So I would have thought he could speak French with a name like that. And he's a Montrealer, and Air Canada is based in Montreal, which is essentially, it's almost more French than English, isn't it, there? It's everyone from the Prime Minister of Canada has supported this decision. And Rousseau, I don't know if you've read this, Jack, he acknowledged this. Despite my many lessons over several years, unfortunately, I am still unable to express myself adequately in French. I sincerely apologise for this, but I am continuing my efforts to improve. A political science professor at McGill University in Montreal, Daniel Ballon, said, language is a highly political issue in Canada, and the Air Canada leadership has been aware of that for a very long time. I would have thought so, Jack. I mean, you've got a separatist movement in and around Montreal.
Yeah, I just thought it was a slightly odd thing to sack your CEO for.
He was due to go anyway, but apparently, he's now gone a little bit earlier. So it is one of those cultural sensitivities. I mean, we are, in Australia, I mean, you live in a sort of melting pot where there'll be quite a few languages spoken, but Canada is a bilingual nation. And Montreal in particular has a very strong French influence. So it is odd that Michael apparently did use the words bonjour and merci, g'day and thank you. But that was it. That was the full extent of it.
Well, they do have two official. I think we have three official languages here now, but they have two in Canada. Yeah.
They, as I say, bilingual nation, and you'll see that everywhere. I mean, you'll see that on street signs. You'll see that in government statements and things like that. That they'll be published. If there's a written statement, it'll be published in English and then published in French. I think actually the French comes first. So I think these are the sensitivities that we're probably not aware of here.
Here, even on the train, when you get the announcements on the train, I think now it seems to come first in Mandarin, then in Cantonese, and then in English, I think. But you get all three of them, and signs, the signs tend to be in traditional Chinese, which is the locals prefer, rather than simplified. But there's lots of English signage as well. Everyone just accepts it, but
well, I mean, look, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that if we had this sort of response to a failure to speak in French in Australia, no one would be able to understand that. But in Canada, it perhaps has been a bit remiss of Mr. Rousseau. Jack, with a name like that, you'd reckon he was born speaking French.
Perhaps not.
Yeah, all right. So learn your French. He's obviously, despite many lessons over several years, some people just can't do it with other languages. Anti-Americanism, Jack, is it back in fashion, or is it just that people don't like Donald Trump?
A bit of both, I think.
Yeah. Well. Go on. We've got a Lowy Institute poll to go through, Jack.
Yeah. The US net favourability fell to minus 17 early 2025, dropping 21 points. So that is a big drop.
That is a big drop, and I can think of one reason, and one great big orange reason for that, Jack.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's much else. I mean, besides, we are talking about, in terms of events, we're talking about the Iran war, which is causing. Now, this study was done, I presume, before the Iranian war.
Yeah, I think so. Yes. Yeah, so far as I can
tell. I suspect these figures got even worse. I did see a bit of a vox pop for what it's worth. I really dislike vox pops, but people were being, and I think it was the ABC doing it. People, while they were in queues at petrol stations, were being asked what they thought of it all. And the major response, and this is just fox popping, it's very unscientific, was, we don't like the orange one for having done this. And I suspect that's a view that's fairly commonly held around the world. So,
interestingly, 80% of Australians still think the alliance with the US is very or fairly important to Australia.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah, just as high a percentage disapprove of Americans using tariffs, the Trump administration using tariffs. But yeah, overall, that we continue to sort of support the to be strong allies with this great military power, but. One that caught my eye, Jack, was shared values. Only 8 to 16% of Australians believe the two nations currently share fundamental values. So that's quite alarming, isn't it?
That surprised me because it's a misconception. I mean, we do share, absolutely, we share most values. Not everything, but most values. I was always amused at university with the virulent anti-Americanism of the activists. And the thing that amused me was that they were culturally American. They took almost all of their culture, even their protest activities, was just a steal from America. But musically, clothing, food to some extent, television, movies, it was all American. So they were culturally indistinguishable from Americans, yet they were virulently anti-American.
Yeah, it just made me think about what Jimmy Carter has said is believed to have told Donald Trump before his first term, and apparently this story really, or what Carter told him, really had an impact on Trump, who has mentioned throughout his campaigning, first term, second term, about forever wars that America's involved in. Carter basically sat him down and said, China has not wasted a single penny on war, and that's why they're ahead of us in almost every way. He went on earlier to explain that since American post-colonial history began, 1776 we'll call it, they've been at war for something like 95% of the time. Almost every year they've been involved in a war somewhere around the world. Now, some of that we might say as being just and fair, but if we go back to the 50s in Iran, or if we go to South America and places like Chile and places like Argentina, sort of meddling around there, Jack, we certainly see America as a military superpower, as an economic superpower. But I think some of us think that maybe that power is used unwisely on occasions, and I suspect the Iranian war is one such example.
Well, you can go back to North Africa in one of the first conflicts in which the new United States was involved, and that was they had a problem with American ships being seized by pirates on the Barbary Coast, and I think it was Thomas Jefferson who was an ambassador there, and they sat down with the ambassador from the Barbary pirates, yeah, and he said, "Well, no, this is what we believe we can do. This is what's in the Quran. You're infidels, so we can do this." So the Americans sent the ships across and captured them and hung them, and stopped the Barbary Coast pirates within a few years. So not all the history is bad.
Yeah, but I suspect this one will take a lot of getting over. We've dealt with Trump's address to the nation, but Marco Rubio, who's probably as clear a communicator, I wouldn't say he's wonderful, but he's at least as clear a communicator as they've got. In an interview with George Stephanopoulos, which would be ABC, I guess, ABC US, he said, number one, the destruction of their Air Force, when he's talking about objectives in regard to this, number one, the destruction of their Air Force, number two, the destruction of their Navy, number three, the severe diminishing of their missile launching capability, and number four, the destruction of their factories so they can't make more missiles and more drones to threaten us in the future. All of this so that they can never hide behind it to acquire a nuclear weapon. That was our objective from the beginning. That remains our objective now. We are on pace and, in fact, ahead of schedule in some of these things, and we are going to achieve these things in a number of weeks, not in a number of months. And I will go on because this is important. Rubio's then asked about talks with Iranian officials, and his response was, well, what I mean is, yeah, so you have people that you are saying some of the right things privately, obviously they're not going to put it out in press releases. And what they say to you or put out there for the world doesn't necessarily reflect what they're saying in our conversations. But at the end of the day, we have to see if these people end up being the ones in charge, seeing if they're the ones that have the power to deliver. We're going to test it. So on that statement, Jack, a negotiated settlement seems pretty unlikely. The Iranians are still maintaining that there has been no contact, no negotiations whatsoever. And you might remember Trump said they bought him a present. Did you see that? It was a lovely present. It was a beautiful present.
There was something from Iran today saying that the president, who remains in place, although with little power, I think, has in fact been talking to the Americans. But I don't think we can tell what's going to happen because I don't think that it's at all clear just where the power in Iran lies at present.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
You know, their economy is in kind of dire straits. It was late last year, and it's getting worse by the week.
It's not going to get any better. Yeah,
no,
yeah.
It's not going to get any better. So it isn't clear to me at any event just what the immediate future lies in terms of who's going to be able to control Iran, whether that will remain with the IGRC, which it seems to be at the moment, rather than with the Ayatollahs and rather than with the civilian government.
It's such a corrupt regime, Jack. This is the other thing. You know, the regime change. I saw Trump saying, well, we've already done it. You know, we've already changed the regime. Well, not really. But with the Iranians and with the Revolutionary Guard in particular, it's a corrupt government. It's been corrupted for many, many years, decades. And these people are invested in this corruption. You know, that's how they make money to buy their nice things and what have you. And they are not going to relinquish in a hurry, are they? Because one of the things that will happen is they'll probably be dragged off for their corruption, or indeed they won't be able to sustain their corruption any further. So they are heavily invested in keeping the state where it is, and that's Revolutionary Guard and all people within the Iranian administration with a bit of influence and power.
Well,
so they're not likely to give it up.
I think it's more complicated than that. The people who are easiest to deal with are just the corrupt, the ones you're describing, because eventually it becomes a question of, well, how do I survive and the money? There's also elements there that are theologically and ideologically committed to what they are going to do. So for them, it's existential. They will fight to the bitter end no matter what happens, right? So it's a complicated country and it's a complicated situation. I wouldn't be one of the people who'd say, I can tell you what's going to happen, because I don't think anyone can.
I don't think anyone can. This is the problem the markets have. This is the problem the world has, really. Yeah. That everything is essentially on hold while the Strait of Hormuz is sorted out. And not made any better by the fact that Trump is sort of storming around saying that, you to the Europeans, go and get your oil. There's a reason why the Americans are so unpopular around the world at the moment, and it is Donald Trump. There's lots of commentary, as you said here, on how badly the war is going. But you've said on how Iran is really winning. I think you've got to understand asymmetrical warfare. Iran doesn't have to win. No, they don't have to win the war, and they're not going to win the war. What they need to do is hang on to their strategic ports like Kharg Island, like elsewhere, and they can pretty much hold the world to ransom for a very, very long time. So in the 21st century, it's not about how many tanks you've got, how many missiles you've got. It's more because we live in a world now where a $4,000 drone can take out a $10 million tank. the Ukrainians used $40,000 worth of explosives on three powerboats to take out the SS Moskva, which will cost $975 million to replace. It's a Russian battleship. So these things, what the Iranians have is a different objective in terms of winning and losing. And if the Americans pack up and go home in a couple of weeks, as seems to be indicated here, although we don't know for sure, if that happens, and the Strait of Hormuz remains blocked, essentially blocked to the world, then you would say things are worse in the region and globally than they were before the Americans and the Israelis began this conflict.
No, I wouldn't agree with that. The fact that the Iran's been deprived of its capacity to inflict damage elsewhere to a very, very large extent would be, to me, it would make it worthwhile. Now, where it ends up, hard to say.
Well, like I say, Jack, if the Middle East is more unstable now or in the next couple of weeks when the Americans leave, if indeed they do, I mean, what objectives have been met? I mean, yes, I understand they've denuded their ballistic missile capacity. They still have 1 million drones, and they still have the capacity to attack pretty much any country in the region, and they continue to do so. We've got the bombing of Kuwait's major refinery now, Jack, where you've got oil spills into the Persian Gulf. There's not a lot that's saying it's going well at all.
Well, the Gulf Arabs are still believers, so they're kind of important in all of this.
Well, yes, we did see in the Australian that the United Arab Emirates is preparing to help the US and other allies open the Strait of Hormuz by force. The UAE is lobbying for a United Nations Security Council resolution that would authorise such action. That'll be a very interesting vote, by the way. Emirati diplomats have urged the US and military powers in Europe and Asia to form a coalition to open the strait by force. And that's great. But you've got to understand that if we're going to have naval patrols through the Strait of Hormuz, normally there's about 5% of the traffic going through the strait at the moment, as was the case before the conflict began. And we're still talking about drones, underwater drones, all sorts of things that will cause problem for any sort of naval craft because they're just puttering along alongside a tanker, hoping they'll get through. I'm not sure that, again, overwhelming military power is going to get you very far on the Strait of Hormuz, because you can just launch a drone from a truck 100 kilometres away and off it goes. But we'll have a look at that. I would think who voted for who votes where would be really interesting on that UAE resolution. Jack, how do you reckon it'd go?
I don't know. I mean, because you got the permanent.
But who would vote against it? Who would vote against? Russia would vote against it, wouldn't they?
Probably.
China would vote against it, wouldn't they?
What about China? They need the straits open to get their oil.
But they're getting their oil, Jack. Theirs is coming through, no problems. Well, maybe there are some problems. I mean, there'll be tanker owners who say, well, we're just not going to do it that way. In the end, the Strait of Hormuz is not a terminal problem. It's not. It's going to be temporary for as long as it takes to build further pipelines around the Middle East.
Yes.
But what we did see over the weekend was the Houthis enter into the conflict, Jack, and that they've got their own little Strait of Hormuz, haven't they? They've got their own little bottleneck that they can hold shipping up that would be even more dangerous.
They're easier to deal with.
They are probably easier to deal with, but it still causes all sorts of problems. All right. Now, last week, Jack, we were talking about education standards in the United States by state, and I've sort of stuck to this business that the southern states were not going. Well, we're constantly at the bottom end of the rankings, and it turns out that that's not quite true. We've seen these underperforming states like Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Tennessee have actually got some very good results in terms of literacy and numeracy. I think these are tested in the United States in grade 4 and grade 8, and you directed me towards a Harvard study that showed that. So I looked at some of the reasons, Jack, and it's a little bit like the old teachers we were just referring to. What Louisiana has done, what Alabama has done, is introduce phonics in schools, and phonics are the sort of basis. If you think of the phonics, the best way to think of it, if you don't know the argument, folks, is think of it as a Dr. Seuss book. You know, if you're learning language, learning to read, the best way to do that is to sound words out, either out loud or to yourself, and that is the best way to acquire literacy, basically. So that's something that the southern states. Some of the southern states did, in fact, pick up. Now, Louisiana ranks number 1 in the country in recovery from pandemic losses in reading. That's the only state in the United States, all 50 and 51 when they count DC, that is ahead in literacy compared to 2019. So that's really interesting too.
Yeah, the other thing they did is I think Alabama has the lowest rate of absenteeism in the United States, and this is kind of basics.
I know where you got the article from, right? I know you were reading through the New York Post, and it popped up.
New York Times.
It's an opinion piece, wasn't it? And
it's in the New York Times.
It took you.
But I've read that elsewhere. I mean, I sent you through a representative sample of what I'd read, and getting the little buggers to school it's very old fashioned, but it does work.
Well, let's just have a look at the rankings. So Harvard have got theirs. There are a number of metrics that Americans use for educational attainment. But the most commonly used one is the NAEP rankings. It's known as the nation's report card. And there was one assessment of educational progress released in 2024-25. So the top is Massachusetts, Wyoming, Florida, New Hampshire, Utah. So some red states there. New Jersey, Indiana, South Dakota. Tennessee is the one you've been talking about there, Jack, one of the southern states that's really had a huge boost to their literacy standards. In the bottom, though, Jack, the bottom 10. Louisiana still is sitting in the bottom 10, but the thing that really caught my eye was New York, California, and not far away is Texas. The 3 most populous states in the country, 2 blue, 1 red. They are in the bottom 15. And New York in particular are known to spend a lot of money in public education. The big improvers were Louisiana, as we mentioned. Mississippi continued its miracle trajectory, showing significant proficiency gains in 4th grade reading and maths. That's where Mississippi started bringing in phonics teaching. And Alabama surpassed its pre-pandemic scores in 4th grade math, a feat almost no other state achieved. Tennessee, as you say, sort of 7-point jump in reading proficiency on state test. It was mirrored by solid gains on the NAPE. And one of the bits that didn't make it into that New York Post, Jack, was that Illinois is one of the few states that successfully escaped. Of course, Illinois, very blue. One of the few states that successfully escaped the steepest decline seen elsewhere between 2019 and 2024, maintaining a steady upward trend in fourth grade math. So
this isn't a red state versus blue state thing at all, I don't think.
No, it shouldn't be. And I was just going to say that. And it really, the other thing that it points out is that spending more money on public education doesn't necessarily lead to better outcomes. Because we're seeing, in a state like New York, for example, one of the biggest spenders per capita on public education is languishing in the bottom 10 of the 51. So yeah, there are just some really interesting results, and I think educators in these southern states should take, should have a pat in the back, and the administrators have done this, have said, look, this is the best way to do this. You're also talking about some behavioural issues in schools, where some kids, no matter what they do, won't be expelled in some states, but in other states they're told to pack their bags. And one of those, it is one of those benefits that when you get disruptive individuals out of the public system, out of the school system, you're going to have better outcomes for the rest of the kids.
The bit you've missed is they did all of this in those states without really spending any more money.
Yeah, they must have spent some money, Jack. They've spent some money. As I said, they've changed the way they teach language acquisition and based it around the old Dr. Seuss stuff around phonics, which has always been successful. There have been a number of educational theories
but which doesn't cost you any more money to
acquisition.
do it.
I'm not suggesting that it is. One thing I did say up front, and perhaps you weren't listening, is that what it does say is that better educational outcomes are not determined by how much money you spend on public education. Mm. But we still do have a lot of social indicators to go through if you want to talk about red and blue states. Infant mortality.
That
for a
wasn't my
start,
point.
Jack, those kids in Mississippi, those kids in Tennessee, those kids in Alabama, of 1,000 that are born in 1 year, 9 of them won't make it to school. They'll be dead. Now, these states in Mississippi is the highest with 9 per 1,000. Other states, other blue states, we'll count them all: New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, California, Rhode Island, New York, Minnesota, Oregon, and Connecticut. They're all blue states, and they have an infant mortality rate around 3.2, which is Australia's rate. In the south, you've got Mississippi at 9, you've got Arkansas, West Virginia, South Dakota, Alabama, all on 8. These are infant mortality rates that are kind of accepted in places like Argentina. And then when we talk about public health outcomes, Jack, Commonwealth Fund's scorecard on state health system performance in America's health rankings, top is Massachusetts. So Massachusetts leads in education. Massachusetts leads in, comes third lowest in infant mortality, and also wins in public health outcomes across the board. The top states in public health outcomes are Massachusetts, Hawaii, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Vermont, Connecticut, Minnesota, Utah, one red state, Washington and Colorado. The bottom states in terms of public health outcomes are Mississippi, West Virginia, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, unbelievably again, Wyoming, Ohio, Nevada, one blue state, Alabama, Kentucky, and Tennessee. So those are other social indicators that you've got to look at as well. And in terms of just life opportunities, Jack, bear in mind, 1,000 kids born in Mississippi, 9 of them won't be going to school at all. They will have died before they turn 5. Anything to say?
No. Well, this arose on an education issue. All I said was that this is not a red state or a blue state issue. All I said was, well, I think you missed something, that there has been a vast improvement in some of the southern states. What do they call it? The Southern Surge. And you said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yes, I'll send you the material and we'll talk about it next week."
No, and you were right, certainly in terms of, a state like Tennessee, it's in the top 10 now.
Yes.
It was languishing. That was always my understanding, was that they were languishing in the bottom in the bottom 20 percentile. And so that's a big boost for them, and they've obviously gone about it. Education administrators and governments too have gone about it in smart ways. You say not spending a lot more money, if any, but getting better outcomes for it. But still, the infant mortality thing, we all know where that comes from. That comes from the imposition of these crazy laws against female reproductive decisions. That's where a lot of their infant mortality comes from. And in terms of public health,
it's a poverty marker as well.
It is to a degree, Jack. But when you check the countries that have got the same sort of figures, you just look at it and go, "This should not be happening." Anyway, it was a really good exercise, and we do, these things. Where you do have poor educational outcomes, you can fix it. That's the first thing. You can fix it if you get the teaching right and you skill up. So I was reading that, was it Alabama, which was the one that took off in reading, Louisiana. In Louisiana, they trained all their teachers to teach phonics. I don't know how much money that costs, but you obviously have to do it. I mean, a lot of the things that happen in Australia in education, they're sort of handed down from on high, and then teachers are just told to do it. A perfect example is anti-Semitic education, and it's just part of various reports that were sent to the Albanese government. They say, "Oh, yes, we need to have it in the curriculum where we talk about anti-Semitism and all this sort of stuff." And that's terrific, and it's necessary, but then they just don't skill up the teachers. You got to learn these things before you can teach them. Anyway, all good stuff. A learning exercise for me. EU has passed a pretty strict new immigration law, Jack. Quite a lot of deportations expected. Is it good? Will it work?
Will it work? Hard to say. It depends. This was the European Parliament that passed.
Yeah, perhaps better rather than will it work. Just go through the sorts of things that that's been proposed here.
Well, they're talking about having return hubs so that European countries could have an offshore processing facility, right? To allow them to process applications.
So a third party nation, is that what they mean?
Yep. Talking about safe third country deportations. They're talking about having a list of countries where their presumption will be that they're not refugees, and that's going to include Bangladesh, Colombia, Egypt, India, Kosovo, Morocco, Tunisia, so that you'll face almost certain immediate return.
Bangladesh safe country, is it?
Strict enforcement and detention.
Seems to think so. Who would be obviously the EU, going through their mechanisms, would determine what is a safe third country and who isn't.
Yeah.
Can you think of one? Think of one that could be used that would be happy to say, well, yes, we'll give us your tired, your poor, your people yearning for freedom.
Well, the Italians.
Where would those third countries be, Jack? I mean, the UK tried Rwanda, and the High Court said, "You got to be kidding."
It's a question of money to a large extent. I think the Italians now do a lot of their processing in Albania. I have an idea. So it is possible. This will only work if it persuades people that the benefits they could see in irregular migration disappeared. If the benefits aren't there, they'll stop coming.
One of the elements here is strict enforcement and detention, and it's called the return regulation, boosts the use of detention, including for children, and increases authorised detention times to enforce deportation. So, I mean, obviously this is in response to the rise of extreme right-wing parties throughout Europe, and with immigration being a very, very hot topic at the moment. So the EU is acting perhaps a little slowly on that sort of political impetus.
It's not just the rise of the extreme right parties, it's what's causing the rise of the extreme right parties in popularity is that the general population don't like the irregular immigration.
Oh, well, this was European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who said, we have learnt the lessons of the past and today we are better equipped. Yes, this is clearly a response to, the AFDs, the Farage's party, and across the board through Europe, where immigration has dragged people to these sort of extreme positions.
Yeah.
And what do you think? What do you think the chances of it working, Jack? Now we can talk about that.
Probably about 40%.
Right. Okay. Well,
I think that I'm not saying that I like all their ideas. I'm saying the approach, that the understanding that you've got to remove the benefits in order to change behaviour is correct. Whether their particular suite of plans is good, I don't really know. And time will see whether it actually gets implemented first of all, or whether the European courts stop it. And then if it's implemented, is it implemented well enough to make it work?
Yes, all right. We shall keep an eye on that. Now, Tony Blair, Jack, is anyone listening to Tony Blair these days? But he did make some reasonable comments about anti-Semitism and the left.
It still always amazes me when I talk to Brits, even Labor people from the UK, just how vehemently anti-Tony Blair they are. And I kind of look at it and think, well, he certainly made some mistakes, but he was the only person I think who could really have taken them into government from the rabble that they were.
That's definitely true. And look, quite seriously, Blair, I saw in an interview recently. I mean, obviously the big problem with him is the Iraq War, and he talked about why it was justifiable even in the rearview mirror. I'm not sure that he was entirely persuasive, but he at least addressed it. And what he has to say, what Tony Blair has had to say, is that progressive politicians are failing to tackle left-wing anti-Semitism because they won't tackle the unholy alliance between parts of their movement and hardline Islamists. His intervention comes after an arson attack that destroyed 4 Jewish community ambulances in Golders Green, North London, last week. I don't know if you saw that. I had to look into that, Jack. 2 British men aged 20 and 19 and a dual British-Pakistani national 17 remain in police custody in regard to that. And last month, 2 British men aged 47 and 45 were arrested on suspicion of arson with intent to endanger life. So like we saw in Sydney and Melbourne, post-October 7, there's been outbursts of this kind of menace against Jewish people in London and in the UK.
Yes, worse than in Sydney, in fact.
Well, we do have to understand that a lot of the stuff in Sydney was driven by our Iranian clowns from the Revolutionary Guard. They were basically sponsoring this stuff and teeing up criminals to commit offences against Jewish people in Australia, and Sydney and Melbourne in particular. All right. Very quickly, we'll just touch on the United Kingdom council elections happening on May 7. 136 councils will go to the polls. On the polling, Jack, and we'll talk about that separately, but on the polling, it looks like Labor will lose many seats. We'll lose a lot of influence in councils around the country.
And the only reason the Tories won't lose quite so many is because they lost them last time.
Yeah, but their numbers aren't too bad, Jack, and we'll talk about the polling. We may as well move on straight on to the polling. But so YouGov, which is the premier polling company in the UK, they have Reform at UK at 23%. That's no change from the previous poll, YouGov poll. Greens at 19, Jack, +1, and that's one of the stories that's probably hasn't really received much of a headline. But the Greens UK were normally around 8-10%. Their votes increased too, hasn't it, according to the polling?
Yep.
Conservatives at 19 +2, Labor 18, and we looked at this the last poll, and so they're down from 19 to 18. Lib Dems at 12, which is their lowest recorded by government this parliament. So they're not travelling all that well either. But Reform have been up in the mid-30s. Now, not always in YouGov polling, it must be said, but on YouGov polling, they've dropped about 10 points in really the last 6 months.
Yeah, the thing that jumps out to me when I read that polling is this, that there's about 40% support for Reform in the Tories and about 40% support for the Greens and Labor.
Yeah, about the same. But no preference voting in the UK, of course, Jack.
No, I know.
So it's all first past the post.
Yeah, and that's going to vary from seat to seat, so it's going to be very hard to predict a result.
I get the feeling that Reform has come off the boil. And Nigel Farage thinks that's because of the polling. The pollsters themselves, Jack, got into a bit of a row with YouGov last week. Mr. Farage accused YouGov, widely seen as British most influential political pollster, of being deceptive over the way it presented surveys on voting intentions, an accusation which prompted YouGov to agree to publish more data alongside its polling. The latest YouGov poll, released on Tuesday after the row broke out, found as we just discovered that the Reform vote hasn't changed since their last poll. But I kind of think you're pushing the wheelbarrow up a hill when you start blaming polling companies for the polling results.
Doesn't seem any point to me.
Yeah, I don't know. He's picking a fight, but they've definitely come off the boil. They are. I saw in another poll, reliable or not, I cannot say, that they are the most unpopular party in the country. That is, the people who don't like them are in bigger number than for any other political party around the place.
Unsurprising.
Yeah, I guess that's not surprising at all. So, now we move on to sport. The AFL has released its new illicit drugs policy. Jack, how does it change from the previous?
Well, if there's more information given to club doctors and all that sort of stuff, and there's no 3 strikes rule.
Well, the 3 strikes, that's what I was going to talk about. So the 3 strikes is gone?
I think so, yes.
But what happens with... see, the way that was for our listeners, the way the 3 strikes rule was, this is the first one you get done for, and you're testing, this is not performance-enhancing drugs. This is cocaine and recreational drugs, cocaine, marijuana, those sorts of things. What we saw is that if you get pinged in a blood test, it's a matter between the player and the doctor, but not the club or the AFL. When you get done a second time, it's a matter between the doctor and the player, but the club is this time notified. And then the third one, you're looking at penalties. And it always just seemed a very strange way of doing things that the club would not know as the employer of the player. Surely they should be made aware of these things at a very low level. But there has been this talk about, AFL players, they're role models, but isn't everybody these days, Jack? Rock stars, entertainers, celebrities, influencers on the internet, Jack. So why should it be different for them?
Yeah, entrepreneurs.
Really? Yeah. Well, most of them are on drugs, Jack.
Yes, and so are most of the rock
much
stars.
Higher rate than the AFL footballers.
Yes,
particularly around real estate purchase, real estate vendors, and what have you. Yes, there'd be I would think above the median of cocaine consumption there. What are we seeing? What are we seeing in the AFL besides the fact that we mentioned last week that the draw has been an absolute shambles, and it has? But what else have we discovered, Jack? The Gold Coast Suns look like the real deal.
Yep.
Sydney Swans had a loss, lost their skipper and probably their best footballer, arguably their best footballer. And they've had a loss, but they look pretty good. The Pies aren't doing all that much wrong either, Jack. They were expected to have a bit of a tumble down, but the ones that look like they're not going to make the 8 at this stage, if we're talking about sides like the Western Bulldogs, who look very good again, but we'll just keep in mind that consistency's been an issue for them. But if you bear in mind the Western Bulldogs and the Sydney Swans will come into the 8, who weren't in the 8 last year, who misses, and you'd have to say so far the Giants would be under the pump. They haven't had a good start to the season at all. Geelong, there were moments when they look absolutely unbeatable in it, then times when they look pretty ordinary. But there's going to be a number of sides come out. And it's not immediately clear who they are. Again, this draw is just a shambles, We've got on the Easter long weekend, Jack. We've got 2 teams on the bye. I mean, why? Anyway,
last weekend the marquee game was Melbourne and North. I think was it?
Melbourne and Carlton.
Melbourne and Carlton was the marquee game
on the Sunday.
Dear.
Yeah. Well, look, people were texting me saying, "Mate, I just got in. I've just checked the scores, quarter time." wait till the third quarter's been played before I'll say anything, because the differential between their first halves and their second halves is just extraordinary. If you take in 2025, is hundreds of points difference. They are the best side in the comp in the first quarter, Jack. So all I think we should be doing is reducing the size of the game to just the 1 quarter, and Carlton be on top of the ladder.
Sort of a T20 approach to the AFL.
That's right. Yeah. Look, it was quite predictable, and it's what Sam Doherty said and got into a little bit of trouble over when he spoke or left a message for his mate Daniel Gorringe. When Carlton lose contests, they get scored heavily against. In fact, he came up with a stat in a subsequent interview that when Carlton win contested footy, they win about 60% of the time. That's not unlike the top sides, but when they lose contested footy, they win 7% of the time, 1 in 16 games, compared to, let's say, a Geelong, who actually, they're around a 40%. Losing contested footy, but still win 40% of the time, can't win 7% of the time. I don't know how they fix it, to be honest.
Got to have a plan B. You got to be able to play when you've got the ball, and you've got to be able to play when you're struggling to get the ball all the time. And they don't do that. Don't do that at all. Well,
one thing
I got a text from a mate who's from the long room last weekend. He said he's there with some Aussie mates. He's an American. He's there with some Aussie mates. And he said, can Carlton blow it from here? I think Melbourne were 8-1, 8-1 on the betting, right? And I said, mate, Carlton can blow it from anywhere.
Yeah.
Get on.
That's
but his
exactly
mates talked him out.
That's exactly what I told my mate, who was going, have a look at the. I think he turned the TV on about 20 minutes into the first quarter. Oh, wow, you're going well, mate. Yeah, we'll see. I'll get back to you in a couple of hours. Look, one of the things, Jack, that really stood out for me, Cozzy Pickett, generally a small forward, but he went into the middle, and he does this a fair bit. He runs on the ball, and he just had this leg speed that none of the Carlton blokes had, and they just couldn't stop him.
He's seriously good, and he's a midfielder now, not a small forward. I think.
I think, okay, yeah, but look, he ran through the midfield for pretty much 3 quarters, the last 3 quarters. And they really had no answer to him. So you've got guys like Cripps, the former Swan guy who's been one
Hewitt
club, Hewitt, George Hewitt.
I think he won the BNF last year, didn't he?
He did, yeah. Sam Walsh as well. There's not a lot of leg speed there, and that's something that Carlton need to do. So they've got a bloke like Ben Ainsworth, who is a small forward, fleet of foot, all that sort of stuff. Why wouldn't they be throwing him into the centre just for 5 or 10 minutes just to provide that leg speed? Not quite sure what was going on there. But anyway, it's hard work barracking for the Blues at the moment. And they play North Melbourne on the Good Friday game. Brisbane have got the Pies in Brisbane, I think it is tonight. And we have the traditional clash, Geelong Hawthorn on the Monday. Who do the Swans play? The Swans play the Eagles in Perth. And the Eagles have been pretty good.
They've been better than I thought they would be. Yes.
Yeah, and so the bottom 3 sides, you'd have to say at this stage, some of the traditional Melbourne clubs, Richmond, Richmond, Essendon, Carlton.
3 of the big 4. Melbourne clubs.
Richmond are going through a rebuild, so they shouldn't be too concerned about where they finish on the ladder. They've got some good kids, and they just need to, get some strength in the body and have 2 or 3 pre-seasons. Essendon, I don't know how they come back, and Carlton have probably got similar but not quite as bad list problems.
Essendon, I don't know whether you saw any of Essendon and North. Early on, when it looked like a bad B-grade amateurs match, Essendon looked okay. As soon as it started to look like an AFL game, they were hopeless.
Yeah, and North is another side that have kicked on pretty well too, and they needed to. They couldn't finish in the bottom 4. They need to show some signs.
They'll
of
be
improvement.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll be okay. They'll be. Knocking on the door, perhaps somewhere in the 8 to 12 type position. But they've got a hell of a good midfield, and there's not much wrong with their forwards and so forth. So they're you can see the development there. In fact, if you're asked to look after any one of these clubs who are in that various rebuilding stages, the club I'd pick would be North Melbourne. And probably Richmond after that.
It certainly wouldn't. It certainly wouldn't be Essendon.
No, it's not Essendon. And I think next month sometime, Jack, it's a year before will be the anniversary of a year since they've won a game. And, that might have been Anzac Day, was it? Did they win Anzac Day last year? I can't remember. But it would have been around that. Oh, no, it was in May, I'm sorry. So that was their last win. So things are looking pretty grim there. Cricket, we talked about the Sheffield Shield last week. What a wonderful game of cricket was. I watched a fair bit of it on Foxtel. Looked like the Vics had them covered. Ran the 5 days. Finished, I think, just before lunch on the 5th day. South Australia, of course, won by 56 runs. Everything was going Victoria's way until Alex Carey made 100. He's made 100 in every Sheffield Shield final he's played in, Jack. I don't know how many, but I did see that stat. I don't know how many finals he would have played in. Definitely 2, but it might be more than that. He's made 100 each time, and that 100.
Good player.
He's a very good player, isn't he? And that gave him a lead of just under 200, wasn't it? And
Yeah.
it was always going to be a bit too much. One of the strengths that South Australia had that Victoria didn't have was a really good middle order. So, you could open them up a bit, open Victoria up a bit. They had a great season. They got really nothing to be concerned about. But, well done to South Australia, who have won back-to-back Sheffield Shields. The Cricket Australia contracts are out, Jack. Not a lot of change. Jai Richardson and Lance Morris. Lance Morris was the very, very quick Western Australian. He's had some injury issues and what have you. Brendan Doggett is in, and Michael Neeser is in. And Sam Constas goes out, and as does Glenn Maxwell, who's probably very close to the end of his international career now.
Yeah.
Matt Renshaw and Jake Weatherald have come in as well. Spinner Todd Murphy, who's had a really good season for Victoria, he's also returned his contract. And I think really when we're looking at the future of Australian Test cricket, Jack, we should be seeing a fair bit more of Todd Murphy as we go.
Yes, I would hope so.
He's a good player, and he's got a good mind as well. Yeah,
and he looks to me the sort of player who'll get better the more he plays.
Yeah. Well, that's just often the way with offies. They reach their peak 32, 33. I'm not entirely sure what Nathan Lyon brings to the party. A lot of experience and an enormous amount of wickets these days, but you do have injury issues around him now. He's getting on for 40 now, and he's 38, 39 anyway. The Big Bash expansion, Jack, and sell-off of the part of the Big Bash competition and its assets. Will it make it number 2 to the IPL, which has just begun, by the way?
Which that's what they're trying to do, isn't it?
That's right. I don't know if it's a good idea, mate.
No. I mean, there are 500 million reasons why they'll say yes to it, because that's what they're going to get. I think the idea is that they sell one of the Sydney teams, one of the Melbourne teams, and sell 49% of everything else, right? I'm a skeptic about this.
Yeah, so am I. And by the way, I mean, it sounds as if Cricket Australia's not making money out of Big Bash surely the clubs will be a bit of a money pit for them. I don't see any sort of rationale for this as well. So what we don't want is the Big Bash to start stomping all over Test cricket as we go, because I think Usman Khawaja was talking about how they were thinking about playing a Big Bash game on Boxing Day and all this sort of stuff. I don't like it. I like my Test cricket. I want to make sure that particular format of the game is well and truly protected. All right. Well, what else do we have in sport this week, Jack? I'm just trying to think. We have been looking at the Premier League. Arsenal, I didn't check, but Arsenal are looking pretty strong, aren't they?
They are.
In the Premier League. There's still a way to go. But the table there is Arsenal still 9 points clear of Man City. Man City with a game in hand. Everyone's played 31 except for Man City and Crystal Palace. In that lot, Aston Villa finished 4th, so they'll be in Europe next year, and they've done really, really well. Liverpool 5th, and you wouldn't like to be paying that wage bill every week, would you? Liverpool to finish 5th. Chelsea 6th, Tottenham still perilously close to potential relegation, Jack. With West Ham also, they're in the gun right now. Burnley and Wolves will go down. But who the third relegated team is will be out of West Ham, Tottenham and Nottingham Forest, with West Ham the favourites to miss out there too. Yes, it just sort of occurred to me that we had some other sport on that we haven't discussed, but I can't remember what it is.
Mary Fowler signed a huge contract this week
Mary Fowler. Who's Mary Fowler?
from the Matildas.
Sorry. Yes. God, I was going to go the full sheer gold there. The former Triple M DJ Jack, who made a rather some hurtful remarks about the Matildas. I didn't go quite as far as that. How much is the contract?
I think 10 million or something. So US
Well
dollars.
done, her. Good stuff.
But I think she's the partner of the Penrith captain.
Oh, right, okay. Well,
What's
look,
his
one thing, of course, we haven't touched on is the NRL, Jack. That's what we're missing, and the Storm are having a little bit of a difficult time of things. They've had a couple of losses now, and the other wonder, well, the Raiders. I don't know what's going on there, but Jack, the NRL were the first code. In fact, the first code to sack a coach, round 3, and the Sea Eagles coach was showing the door to be replaced by Kieran Foran, who's I think 35, never coached before, good player at the Eagles, but he'll be under the pump too because the board obviously said after round 3, when you get to sacking a coach at round 3, you've obviously if you're a director of the club, you've obviously got to feel that the coach has lost the players. There can be no other reason for getting rid of a coach. You know, it can't just come down to win-loss ratio. They've got to come to a conclusion that you know the
players are no longer playing for him, right?
Yeah, and that would be the only reason. Otherwise, you are acting prematurely, and you'll end up being like Tottenham Hotspurs, or dare I say, Carlton.
What do you think? Do you think they borrowed Ian Collins to drive the Kingswood and park out the front of the house?
Well, yeah, it's just very early, isn't it? You know, and look, who knows what goes on inside clubs? There are so many armchair critics and all that sort of stuff, but you never really know what's going on politically in the club and how the players feel towards the coach and all that sort of stuff, unless you're in it. If the Eagles coach had genuinely lost the players, well, yeah, he's got to go. But if it's just we lost the first 3 games, or we lost 2 of the first 3 games, then I don't think that's a good idea. Broncos have bounced back a little bit. Knights going beautifully at the same time. Jack. So they absolutely thumped the Warriors in New Zealand last week. So well done there. All right, well, I think that should take us out. Jack, you got anything else you want to add?
No, nothing. Wouldn't take too long.
All right. Well, we just want to thank our listeners once again. We'll be back next week, of course, but just following on from the earlier stuff that we had, comment from Lawrence. Yeah,
thank you, Lawrence.
We love getting a bit of correspondence about the show. So and I prefer the personal stories rather than, we really love what you do. I mean, I just prefer to see some people's individual stories, and that'd be great. So if you've got something like that, feel free to fling it in, and you can remain anonymous if you wish to. We can do all of that as well. And now it is 4:31 on the 2nd of April 2026, and it's beer o'clock, Jack.
Bit early for me.
It's beer o'clock around here anyway, and we wish our listeners a very happy Easter. Hope you have a great time with family and friends. See you, folks.